Naming conventions in Unreal Engine 5. Let's go. So I've broke these into different categories. The first one is static meshes, and the next one is textures. So we'll go through and we'll start with the static meshes. So when you're typically naming your assets, you want to have the prefix of sm underscore for static meshes. An example here is just sm underscore example. So the example is just the name of your asset. Now when you've got groups of different static meshes, we then add the suffix of number plus letter. So under here you can see it's static mesh underscore wall underscore O1A, and then the following one ends with O1B and then O1C. So that's just this. What this does is it allows you to kind of organize your assets much easier in terms of grouping, in terms of naming. It's very easy to read this. You can see, right, okay, this group here is the first group and they have three different assets. So when you want to add even more groups, so we have different groups of walls here, for example, we then use a new number. So instead of 01A, we then use O2A, O2B, O2C, etc. And now you could change the naming of the wall here. Could be a corner, it could be an arch, for example. This all just depends on your project and what you're working on, and also what you're comfortable with. This is just how I typically name things. It's just from my experience. This is what's worked for me. So if we move to textures, we then start with the prefix t underscore. So t underscore ground for the example here. And for each texture type, there's a different suffix. So we change the ending here. So we've got ground O1A, ALB for albedo or slash diffuse. Sometimes people put underscore D for diffuse. But I'll show later on why I think that can be a bit confusing. So you can see here we've got underscore NRM for normal, underscore M for mask, underscore RMA for roughness, metallic, and ambient occlusion. So that is three textures combined into one, R, G, and B. And then RMO for roughness, metallic, and opacity. So this is good for masked materials, things like fences, nets, where you want opacity to be added there so you can see through the texture. Now, as I was talking about the diffuse here, sometimes people use underscore D, but we then have decals, which use masked and opacity textures anyway. But typically, what I like to do down here is I prefer to use the prefix of decal. This is just my preference again. I just find it's much easier to find the decals against all these other textures. If we just put t underscore puddles underscore decal, it'd be much harder to find it. Although you can just type in decal and it will just show you those assets. But this is just, again, my kind of preference anyway. And sometimes you may create blueprints to do things in your environments, like opening doors or flickering lights here, for example, as you can see. So you start off with the prefix BP for blueprints, then underscore whatever the name of your asset is. So BP underscore flickering light O1A. So that's pretty much the naming conventions that I use as an artist anyway. Feel free to comment below any naming convention that you use that you may think's better than what's here. I'm quite open to changing this. This is just a rough guide for anybody who's looking for a good naming convention. Maybe you're just starting out in a new project, or you've got an existing one and you want to just organize your assets better. So I'll show you inside Unreal Engine just how these can be quite handy. And yeah, feel free to take a screenshot of this. Just use it as your notes. So I'm just in the starter content here on Unreal Engine. I'll just search that there. But typically when you're in your library here and you're looking for assets, you can look for a static mesh. So SM underscore. And you can see here you've got a list of all the different static meshes. You can grab anything and drag it, etc. So when you know these abbreviations, prefixes rather, you can start finding assets much quicker. So T underscore. So you can see we have different textures here, etc. Now, in this example, you can see they're using different naming conventions like M and N and D. So it's all just your own preference really as to what you want to use. But the convention I'm using and the one that I've just showed you here in that sheet, that's what I prefer to use. So hopefully this has been helpful. If you've got any questions or queries, feel free to post in the comments down below. Thanks.